back to Secret Weapons, and today we're taking a look at two new fuzzes from Collision Devices. It's a funny thing, I kind of try to run this channel in such a way that I am not super proud of anything I've done more than 6 to 8 weeks ago, which isn't to say that those projects, those pedals, those videos are not of value or worthwhile or anything like that, but my idea is always I want to be improving. I want to be developing as a songwriter, as a mixing engineer, as a guitar player at its core, as a, hopefully based on the way this video looks, as a colorist or a videographer. Time over time, I want to always be improving because that's kind of what we need to be doing as artists. But over the last couple of years, there are precious few videos that I do find myself going back to. And by that I mean specifically the intro songs of a handful of videos I have done, where I go back and I re-listen and I go, something connected there, something really kind of jumped out at me in a way that I found really cathartic or inspiring, or something that kind of like fundamentally changed the way I was approaching my instrument or the way I was approaching songwriting. And one such video absolutely was and is the Black Hole Symmetry by Collision Devices. There's something about that one knob fuzz, delay, reverb, shoegaze machine, that song that I wrote for that one, it's just something that I revisit fairly frequently, and I have kind of stayed very proud of over time. And I think part of that was the nature of that one knob fuzz was something where once you got it dialed and once you unlocked what made it special, it really works, which conveniently dovetails seamlessly into what we're talking about today, which is two new fuzzes from Collision Devices. And fittingly, we're going to start things off by talking about the Singularity. And this is, in fact, the one knob fuzz from that shoegazing marvel, the Black Hole Symmetry, with a small tweak, which is you have all of that bone-crushing ferocity of that fuzz. And you heard me talk about this fuzz in the original video. I'll link it below if you haven't watched it yet. But you also heard on that intro track with that Balaguer-Boberchel signature baritone. This thing is vicious sounding. It has a density and a weight to it as a fuzz that is incredibly severe. And now it also has a little toggle in the top left-hand corner for some high pass roll off. So you've got a little, a lot, or none, depending on how you have this little knob or this little switch set. And there's not a lot to say about this one. It is one knob. It will bash your skull in. It's really good. We'll get to some sound samples, but there's nothing else to say. If you wanted the Black Hole Symmetry for the fuzz, didn't need the reverb, didn't need the delay, or just didn't have space for all of it, you need to be looking at this. This is a really, really good fuzz pedal. But not content to just rest too heavily on their laurels and release a fuzz from their most popular release, they also have elected to come out with TARs on the same day. And this is quite the device. You have a one knob fuzz with a master output. The reason I'm saying one knob fuzz, by the way, is because this master applies to everything, including this fuzz, which is its own thing inside. And by that I mean you have a fuzz right here, this big knob right here. And pro tip, if you pick one of these up, take this, turn it all the way up, and just leave it. It sounds the best, completely maxed out. It has an astonishing amount of articulation. Trust me, when you get to the sound samples, you'll hear it. The gain at 10 on TARs is the best fuzz, so you're welcome. But you have a fuzz pedal, you have a Korg-style analog low-pass filter with resonance and cutoff controls, and an expression control to control it remotely. You also have an attenuation control for basically the resonance. It's an ability to keep that resonance from getting too out of whack, from totally destroying your amplifier or clipping your input signal into your DAW. You also have a volume control for that filter, and the reason it has its own volume is because you can run it in series or parallel with the fuzz, which means you can in fact zero out that fuzz, take it out of the circuit, and use this as a clean tone low pass filter control, which is really cool. But it also doesn't end there. You have that fuzz that can either be running in parallel with your clean tone, or in series, your clean tone hitting the fuzz, going through that filter, And then you can also add in another fuzz at the end that is independent of that filter, basically giving you dual fuzzes in parallel, or clean tone in parallel with your fuzz. It is really, really versatile. You'll hear it in the sound samples. This thing can do a myriad of really killer, crushing textures, ambient textures, otherworldly sci-fi industrial experimental stuff. TARS is one of the most interesting fuzz releases I've ever covered on this channel. It is doing so much, and it does it very well. So let's get to our sound samples. Let's give these things a listen, and let's see what we've got to kind of work with today. As always, before we get into our sound samples, let's go ahead and talk through our signal chain and the context we're working in. I am playing a Ernie Ball Music Man St. Vincent Goldie into the Collision Singularity, TARS, El Cap, the Matchless Lightning 15 amplifier, and a Universal Audio aux box. Our dry tone sounds like this. So let's start things off with the Singularity, as it's obviously the more straightforward of the two devices. We're going to go ahead and run through the gain range and then take a look at that tone control. So TARS is actually a really, really fascinating layout, and it's definitely going to be the more involved of these two devices, which is why we saved it for second. At its core, you have your gain, master, resonance, and cutoff right here, which is your filter. You have a volume control for that filter system, an attenuation for that filter system as well, and a secondary fuzz that can be placed in line for that filter. And that may seem like a lot, but it's actually very, very practical, which is really funny. This is effectively a one knob fuzz circuit, very similar to the Singularity over here. The difference being, I think that this sounds best pretty close to completely maxed out. There's more treble and articulation and clarity in that gain stage when you have it totally cranked. There is a switch on the side that allows you to run that fuzz into the filter or in parallel with it. And the really cool thing about that is it means that when you have it in series mode, you are affecting that fuzz gain stage by this filter system, giving you a lot of very fascinating fuzzy textures. Or you can run it in parallel and set your filter level of your dry guitar tone with this low pass filter, effectively meaning you have access to this filter system without the fuzz if you don't want it, or blended between the two using volume from here to blend into the volume created by the gain stage and then gained to your master for all output. And as if we didn't need more, you also have a secondary fuzz circuit right here, so that if you want to run this fuzz wide open and then run a parallel fuzz with some filtering on it, you have that option as well. Or you can run both fuzzes together into the filter because, of course, you can. We are not just going to run through every single individual parameter on here because that's just not how TARS is built. So instead, we are going to start by taking a look at the fuzz, this kind of main fuzz, I should say, and then we'll take it out of the circuit, listen to the filter as a clean filter, bring in that fuzz, and then we'll just start experimenting. It's worth noting at the start here, we have all of this stuff completely out of the circuit. We are just going to hear these two. Like I said, you can hear it get a little bit woollier as you turn it down. And when you take it to 0, it actually goes to 0 volume, which is how you take it out of the circuit completely if you want to make use of this filter. So let's turn up that low pass filter volume. So now this is being controlled still by that master, but you have your low pass filters volume as well. And this filter gets very, very resonant. The low point on here is going to set the minimum for your expression pedal. So if you want it completely out and heel down, or if you want some, you can kind of set it above. And then there's the attenuation. And then, of course, there is this additional fuzz right here, only active in series mode. So we have our dry tone. We can blend in that fuzz. Now move that fuzz into of course, crank it because this fuzz sounds the best at full. And then you can add an extra unfiltered fuzz. And now you have the resonant fuzz being filtered in parallel with a secondary unfiltered fuzz. So if you really kind of like crank the resonance there, you can get some really cool kind of like dual fuzz textures. Which can get really chaotic because this resonance filter can get really, really insane. Yeah, Tars is a texture machine, and there's a couple of really cool things you can do with how insanely textural this gets. Like, let's take that fuzz back out of the circuit and bring that filter back in, kind of at a medium point. There we go. We don't need the secondary fuzz considering we've got the gain all the way off. We're now back to like a nice, gentle, clean tone. And because we have access to that filter as its own thing, let's go ahead and use this for some like cool ambient swells.